As you probably know by now, my wife and I started saving and investing the large majority of our monthly income over 8 years ago in pursuit of what we consider to be a life-changing goal: being able to retire early and never have to work again for money if we don't want to. Now that we're much closer to that goal than we ever imagined when we started back in 2017, it's time to revisit the basic principle we're basing our early retirement plan on, the 4% rule. Because lately, everyone seems convinced that it's dead, that it's too optimistic for today's high valuations. But here's what almost nobody talks about. Most people following the 4% rule are statistically far more likely to die with too much money than to run out. So, is all of this pessimism warranted? Or should we perhaps be more worried about working extra years we don't actually need? And what would early retirement look like for my wife and me here in Austria, including taxes and health insurance, when investing globally through low-cost ETFs? Let's dive in, starting with the basics of the 4% rule. The 4% rule says you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in the first year of retirement, then adjust that amount for inflation each year, and your money should last at least 30 years. It's a simple mathematical foundation of how my wife and I have been planning our early retirement, and what the most popular financial independence writers like Mr. Money Mustache have based their own early retirement on. The rule was created in 1994 by Bill Bengen, who studied every possible 30-year retirement period going back to 1926 to find a withdrawal rate that would have survived even the worst possible moment to retire in modern history. His answer was 4.17% per year using a 50% stocks and 50% bonds allocation. Bengen recently updated his research and now mentions a rate as high as 4.7% if you include international stocks, small cap, and lower the bond portion a bit. Of course, all of this is based on historical data and nobody knows the future. As for my wife and I, we're aiming for a withdrawal rate around 4%, with an allocation of close to 100% to stocks from all across the world via global ETF, plus 6 to 12 months of living expenses on a high-yield savings account, so around 2 to 4% in cash. This translates to a goal of around 800,000 euros, which at 4% would give us roughly 32,000 euros per year to live on. The withdrawal amount would then be adjusted for inflation, so if inflation is 2%, it means we would withdraw 32,640 euros the following year, and so on. But did a close to 100% stock allocation have a similarly high success rate to a mix of stocks and bonds? As it turns out, yes. Not only in the original Trinity study, but also in backtests containing global stocks. But first things first, our main ETF covering the FTSE All-World Index contains around 60% US stocks and 40% stocks from the rest of the world right now based on their current market cap. So now let's look at the early retirement simulations containing world stocks and including return and inflation data up to 2023 on the Poor Swiss website, which I found quite interesting. Over 30 years, 40 years, as well as 50 years, we're looking at historical success rates of 90+% based on this data. Now, his backtests obviously had some limitations. For example, he only found reliable world stock data starting from 1970 and filled in the gap with US stock market data from 1871 to 1970. Even still, having some extra diversification by covering stocks from the entire world instead of only focusing on a single country, even if that's the US, may slightly increase your chance of success when drawing down from your portfolio in retirement. And looking at another resource, Portfolio Visualizer, a portfolio consisting of 60% US stocks and 40% global ex-US stocks, also showed a promising 93% success rate after 30 years, with most portfolios ending the 30-year period far above their initial 800,000 balance, even after withdrawing an inflation-adjusted 4% each year. Here's the thing though, when the time comes, we're unlikely to stick to exactly 4% no matter what happens, something we'll get to in a moment. By the way, you can find links to my favorite low-cost brokers in Europe for ETFs down below in the description, which is a great way to support me if you'd like to, as I don't do sponsors. Here's what I find problematic about the 4% rule debate. Everyone's arguing whether 4% is safe enough. After all, the future is uncertain and valuations are high. As a result, it has become fashionable to throw out more and more conservative numbers. So why not just play it safe and use 3.5%, 3%, or even a very pessimistic 2.7% as Ben Felix mentioned in a video a few years ago. That way you can get as close as possible to a 100% success rate based on historical data. But few people ask themselves, what does that actually mean? Because if you flip it around, a high chance of success ultimately means a high probability of underspending in retirement. And we're already looking at a 90+% chance of success historically using the 4% rule over 30 years or more, with the median outcome being that retirees end up with 2 to 4 times more money than they started with, even after spending an inflation-adjusted 4% each year. Thus, I'd argue that realistically the real risk isn't running out of money. It's being so conservative that you work many extra years you didn't need to, dying with millions you never got to enjoy. And this gets even more absurd when you realize something. The traditional 4% rule assumes you'll never adjust your spending once you hit your FI number. It doesn't matter if the market crashes 40%, you're spending an inflation-adjusted 4% of the initial retirement amount every year. Nobody actually behaves this way in real life. Research shows retiree spending naturally declines about 1% per year as people get older. And when markets crash, people delay the new car, swap an expensive vacation for a less expensive one, and cut back temporarily. My wife, daughter, and I could easily spend 10 to 20% less for a while if we needed to and still live a happy, fulfilling life. And most people are still forgetting about something else in most of these debates about withdrawal rates. First, do you really think you'll never earn a single extra euro once you're retired? I find that extremely unlikely based on all the early retirees I know personally. Second, what about potential inheritances in the future? Is that number really going to be zero? And lastly, what about pension or social insurance payments once you reach the official retirement age in your country? Are you factoring that into your pessimistic calculations? Chances are you're not. I recently heard financial advisor Aubrey Williams talk about a risk-based guardrails approach to retirement spending, which I found very useful. Basically, you target a 90% success rate with your withdrawals. Meanwhile, your upper guardrail is a 100% chance of success, so if your portfolio performs well and you hit that, you should be able to safely increase spending until you're back to 90%. On the other hand, if your portfolio drops in value and you hit your lower guardrail of 75%, you reduce spending by 5 to 10% to get you back to a 90% chance of success. You then simply check once a year, hit the upper guardrail, spend more and enjoy life. Hit the lower one, reduce your expenses slightly, or make some extra money. In essence, it's a dynamic system that keeps adjusting to ensure you remain in historically safe territory. The beauty is this approach recognizes reality. You're not a robot following a spreadsheet. You're a human who can look at the situation each year and adapt as things change. If you do that, research shows you should be able to spend more overall in retirement compared to someone following a strict 4% withdrawal rate while maintaining a higher safety level. This is the framework my wife and I plan to use as well. If we were to retire today, we wouldn't just blindly stick to an inflation-adjusted 32,000 euros in withdrawals each year, regardless of what markets do. If our portfolio grows significantly, we'll happily spend a bit more. And if it drops and our success probability falls below 75%, we'll adjust temporarily until things stabilize. Combined with a high likelihood of extra income, eventual pension payments, and potential inheritances at some point, our actual risk of running out of money is far lower than the rigid 4% rule studies suggest. Okay, but what about taxes and health insurance? Are you factoring those in? Of course we've run the numbers. After all, we live in Austria, which is generally a high-tax country. But here's the thing, we have something called Regelbesteuerungsoption, which you should use if your income tax bracket is below the 27.5% capital gains tax rate. And the way tax brackets work here, it means that based on our current expenses, we'd be paying close to 0% in capital gains taxes when withdrawing money from our investments in ETFs. Here's why. By selling equal amounts between both of our accounts, my wife and I can realize around 27,000 euros in capital gains per year without paying any taxes, assuming we have no other income. And since only part of what we sell is actual profit, maybe 50%, we can withdraw significantly more than that to cover all our expenses while still paying close to zero in taxes. Okay, but what about health insurance? This part can also be far more affordable than you think. As long as one of us has the intention to earn even a single extra euro in any given year from any of our projects, in Austria we can get social and health insurance through SVS, with both of us being covered for a total of 179 euros per month. Our daughter is also covered for free until she's 18, or even longer if she decides to go to university. As you can see, while Austria is pretty rough when it comes to taxes and social insurance costs while you're working, it's not a bad right place to retire early. So make sure you don't blindly copy advice from American FIRE bloggers and run your numbers for your country's specific tax system and healthcare costs instead. Look, I'm not going to pretend the 4% rule is perfect or that the future will exactly mirror the past. Current valuations are elevated and future returns might be lower than historical averages. Nobody knows what the next 50 years are going to look like. All we can do is look at the longest possible time frame in the past and make informed decisions based on that data. But here's what I do know. The 4% rule wasn't designed for the average scenario. It was designed to survive the worst scenarios in modern history. And based on the simulations I've run, we're still looking at historical success rates of close to 90% with an ETF portfolio consisting of 100% stocks from all across the world. Add in even the slightest bit of flexibility, risk-based guardrails, the high likelihood of some unplanned future income, and eventual pension payments, and I simply don't see us running out of money. So for us, the real risk isn't our portfolio going to zero. It's working many extra years we don't need to, just to push our success rate from 90 to 95 or 100%. Chances are we're going to leave our daughter with a sizable inheritance even after decades of retirement spending anyway. And that's the reality few people seem to understand. Optimizing for a 100% historical success rate means optimizing for dying with a ton of money you never got to use. Now look. If having flexibility in your spending terrifies you, or you simply feel more comfortable being extra conservative, that's perfectly fine. Do whatever makes you sleep best at night. I just wanted to counter some of the excessive pessimism I've seen surrounding the 4% rule over the past few years. After close to 9 years on this journey, I still consider it to be a great starting point for planning early retirement. For us, our 800,000 a year goal at 4% with a bit of flexibility feels like the right balance between safety and freedom. You're free to do things differently. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to gently tap the like button and to subscribe if you haven't yet. You can find my favorite local brokers for ETFs in Europe linked down below in the description, which is a great way to support me as I don't do sponsors. And as always, none of this was financial advice. I'm just openly sharing how my wife and I are thinking about our own situation based on the research we've done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and until next time.